Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. A little bit of a quieter day in the basketball world. You know, obviously the big piece of news, the Elijah Arenas stuff. I have nothing to add there. I know nothing other than the reports that are out there. My thoughts and prayers, obviously, with the entire Arenas family. If there's any further development, we'll discuss it probably on Sunday night's show. But I just bring it up because in terms of the stuff that we normally talk about, it has been a very quiet day or so since the transfer portal closed. But what I want to do now is, instead of talking about anything that necessarily has happened, kind of do a bigger picture conversation about a program that we have discussed quite a bit here on the Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. Really, since we started doing this, but certainly the last probably 6-7 months as the season unfolded, didn't go as planned. We're talking about the North Carolina Tar Heels. Okay, so North Carolina, everybody knows the story. Struggled out of the gates. There were questions about Hubert Davis's job. I never really thought he was in danger of losing his job. We later find out he got an extension, which is another conversation for another day. But it was really about early to mid-February that Hubert Davis started publicly talking about we need a GM. We need to change how we do things. And so I think the conversation about Carolina quickly went from, is Hubert Davis going to be gone to maybe more realistically, what is he going to do this offseason to prove that change has come? Well, I bring it up because on Wednesday, we got an interesting piece of news. Now, I think Carolina fans maybe misinterpreted what I thought of it, but I felt like this was a good way to kind of talk Carolina and the state of the program because on Wednesday, Jonathan Givony from ESPN reported that Drake Powell, former 5-star McDonald's All-American, has officially declared for the NBA draft. Not a player that I think, moves the needle like it makes or breaks Carolina's season. He averaged 7.5 points, 3.5 boards per game. But, talented upside kid. He's going to be an NBA player at some point. You just didn't know if you were going to lose him this season. But I bring it up because when that news went out, I put out a tweet that I didn't intend to kind of create a discussion and create a discourse and create a narrative. But when I started thinking about UNC going into next year, I said to myself, are we sure that they're actually better going into next year after this offseason in the portal with the GM higher than they were a year ago? And so you can see the tweet on the screen. It certainly made waves with both Carolina fans. Duke fans loved it. Make no mistake, the Duke fans loved it that saw it. But I put out this tweet when I saw that Drake Powell was leaving or at least declaring. And I said, UNC went out this offseason, hired a GM, raised a bunch of money, and ended up with arguably a worse roster than they had a year ago. Hubert Davis is so cooked, man. Well, I'll say this. I think, first of all, it was a little bit misinterpreted by UNC fans. I think UNC fans thought that I somehow thought Drake Powell was going to make or break the 25-26 season. That's not what I was saying. But I'll also say, even within the Carolina community, it seemed like some people agreed with me. Many didn't. And what I want to talk about now is, where are we? We've talked a lot about Arkansas and Kentucky and UConn and Indiana. We haven't talked much about Carolina. Let's talk about who has come in. And then I think more importantly, is the roster actually better? And then two, as importantly, is there anybody left out there that you can go get that is significantly upgrade this roster? Because ultimately, I think Carolina really kind of thought they were set after the portal closed. Drake Powell leaves. Now you're probably in the market for somebody else. All right, let's talk about Carolina. I'll be super quick with the guys that they lost because at this point, it's water under the bridge. Doesn't matter. RJ Davis graduates. Elliot Cadeau goes in the portal. I don't think that was a surprise. We talked about it at the time. After the season, Elliot Cadeau was asked about returning to Carolina. He said something to the effect of, I would love to, but you know how that stuff goes. Kind of insinuating, I don't know if there was really a spot for him. But he leaves. Ian Jackson leaves. We've talked about Ian Jackson leaves, We talked about that from the UNC perspective, from the St. John's perspective when it happened. And then there's been, a couple other pieces here or there. But what I want to do is talk about what Carolina does have coming back. How good is that group going to be? And then what they might need to add going forward. So first of all, do like some of the moves that were made by Carolina this offseason. And I don't want to make it seem like I don't. First of all, I thought Seth Trimble, really essentially the only main returnee. We'll see about Van Allen Lubin. There's some, eligibility stuff that's a little bit complicating with him. But, Seth Trimble, I thought really developed into a very nice college basketball player this year. 11.5 points per game, 5 rebounds, a lot of boards for a smaller guard. He didn't shoot the ball great, dealt with some injury stuff, et cetera, et cetera. But I bring it up because I thought he turned into a pretty good college basketball player. In terms of the key additions, listen, I love Henry Visar. I really do. I think everybody knows, but I live on the West Coast, probably watch a little bit more Arizona than I think a lot of maybe the national media does. And Henry Visar is a really good player. And as a matter of fact, the only thing that was annoying about the Henry Visar recruitment is that he committed literally while we were at the Final Four previewing the 2 Saturday night games. So it was like we were on air talking about, Houston Duke. Henry Visar was probably one of the 10 best players who entered the portal, commits during the show. We didn't really have a chance to talk about him. So I bring it up, but he is a piece that I really do like. A guy that I think is a little bit misrepresented maybe nationally. Averaged 9.5 points, 5 boards. The big thing, as a true 7-footer, shot 33% from 3. And keep in mind, averaged 9.5 points, 5 boards in about 20 minutes of play per game. Not great at math, but you extrapolate that out to a full 40 minutes. That's a 20 and 10 guy. Now, I'm not saying he's going to get there, but I do think it's worth noting that the stats were a little bit skewed because of the fact that, early in the year, he was playing a pretty minimal role. Krivas goes down with injury. His role steps up, and he has some monster games. 17 points, 6 boards against BYU in a win there. 19 points, 7 boards in a win over Baylor. 22 and 8 against Arizona State. That was the famous Bobby Hurley yelling at people. Oh, that happens every game. Never mind. Disregard that. But Henry Visar, really talented piece. I'll say this too, Carolina fans, since I think Carolina fans think I'm being negative about your team. I actually think Jaren Stevenson's really good too. Played at Alabama. We've talked about him a lot, but I feel like he was kind of a piece that just got lost in the shuffle at Alabama. It's not, Nate Oates' fault. It's not Grant Nelson's fault. But that was a team that probably had like one too many big guys in wings, and they're trying to figure it all out. And, Grant Nelson was going to play. Cliff Omiori was going to play. And then you go on and on down the list, and it's like all of a sudden there's Jaren Stevenson. And so this was a guy that I think with a bigger role, with a more defined role, I think he can be really good. And this was a guy that we talked about when he entered the portal, is like, Alabama doesn't go to the Final Four 2 years ago without Jaren Stevenson. That, what was it, 19, 20 points against Clemson in the Elite Eight. So I like that piece. I like Caleb Wilson, by the way. We talked a lot about Caleb Wilson when he was being recruited. 6'9", 6'10" forward. I think he's a little Jaren Stevenson-ish as far as his ability at a big size to play make. Pretty athletic, all of that. I think Caleb Wilson could be really good. And then you kind of get to the guards. That's where it gets interesting. We mentioned Seth Trimble. Kyan Evans commits from Colorado State. I think that's interesting from this perspective, is that clearly after this past season, you wanted to add size to the backcourt as well as skill. Well, he certainly brings skill. 44% shooting from 3, 3.5 assists per game for the Colorado State team that nearly made the Sweet 16. He is a little bit on the smaller side, though, about 6'1", 6'1.5", 6'2", so you worry a little bit about that, but I like him. And then Jonathan Powell, really nice piece out of West Virginia. To me, I think, you could kind of sit there and say, well, wait a second now. He's kind of a nice pseudo replacement for Drake Powell. Is it a situation where basically, they're going to play very similar roles, and basically, he's a 6'6" wing that likes to shoot the ball. Was he Drake Powell insurance? Did he, did Drake Powell declare because he saw the writing on the wall? I don't know, but I do think a guy that averaged 8.5 points in the Big 12 this year, played well late, 15 points in the opening round of the Big 12 tournament, in the final game of the regular season. And so he had his moments, but, very talented player. And then am I missing anyone else? I think that's basically it. And so I guess the question now becomes, and again, we're waiting on Van Allen Lubin, is two things. One, is a core of Kyan Evans, Seth Trimble, Jonathan Powell, Caleb Wilson, Jaren Stevenson, Henry Visar, is that better than last year? Well, I'll say this. Listen, and I say this with all these teams, is that when you end the season losing a certain way, I think you always try to overcorrect in the offseason, right? I've said this with St. John's, is that Rick Pitino was so mad that his team couldn't bully Arkansas and they just didn't have enough skill. What does he do? RJ Lewis, you got to go. You bring in Bryce Hopkins, who's not quite as athletic. So you look at St. John's, they went for more skill this offseason than sheer athleticism, which is Rick Pitino's trademark. Arkansas loses in the Sweet 16 because they get bullied on the boards. Big Z's got to go. In comes Nick Pringle, in comes Malik Ewan, etc. And so I think with Carolina, they were tired of just not having enough size down low. So I think they pseudo overcorrected by adding Henry Visar, a true 7-footer. Jaron Stevenson's a 6'10", 3-4 guy, and Caleb Wilson's a 6'10", 3-4 guy. The questions become, do you have enough size in the backcourt? That was an issue last year, right? We just talked about it. Elliot Cadeau, RJ Davis, Ian Jackson, was probably the closest thing you had to the size that you wanted. But I don't know that really got corrected with Kyan Evans. Now, Kyan Evans is a much better three-point shooter than Elliot Cadeau. He is stepping up a level, so we'll see how that translates. But I guess when I sit here on paper, I sit there and say, well, Kyan Evans is maybe a half a step up from Elliot Cadeau. We don't have to get into the whole thing, and I don't want to sound like I'm criticizing previous players. I think the front court is definitively better, certainly more skilled, certainly bigger and more athletic. I guess the question to me is, are you significantly better in the backcourt, and are you a team that is significantly built to be significant? I keep saying significant, so I'll stop saying that word and just say, are you built to be better in 25-26 than you were in 2023 or 2024, 2025? And I don't know the answer to that. I went back and looked to make sure. In my final preseason top 25 last year, I did have UNC in the top 10. You know how I know? It's because I had the same top 10, not in the exact order, but, pretty close. Same 10 teams that the AP poll did. So UNC was a preseason AP top 10 team. I had them somewhere in the 8 to 10 range. And I think we all knew going in, hey, they don't have a true 5-man. That could be an issue. Well, I don't think we realized how big of an issue it would be when you had both no 5-man, a really small backcourt, and it didn't help that a team that you lost to 3 times your rival was a team that positionally was the biggest team in college basketball. I think lengthwise, size-wise, they were, in fact, the biggest team in college basketball. So I think there are pieces and spots that you feel better about. There are pieces and spots that I kind of feel the same about. And I think the big question now to me, and this is where I think it gets interesting, is there another piece left that you can go out and get? Again, I think if Drake Powell would have returned or did not declare for the draft, I do think there's probably a scenario where you sit there and say, you know what, we're in good shape. But to me, I still think it's worth going out there and seeing what else is out there. I know the portal's closed. I know there's not a ton left. But I think what would stand out to me is a few things. Is one, first of all, you did reach out to Andrej Stojakovic. Stojakovic, of course, took the visit to Illinois earlier in the week, did not commit, so that's a good sign. And I think the question becomes, is he legitimately interested in Carolina? Would he take a visit? He's familiar with the school because, of course, they recruited him pretty hard when he went into the portal last year. And so I'll be curious to see if they can make a late move on him. I think Illinois has to be considered the favorite. Illinois, of course, going with the heavy European influence, not only the 2 Avicic brothers, but, of course, they've gotten 2 guys right out of Europe. So Stojakovic, even though he's born and raised in the Bay Area, would fit right in on that team. So we'll see if you can get Andrej Stojakovic onto a visit? Can you prove to him that he is the missing piece? Because I do think, like I said, I think you need one more guy. Jamir Watkins at Florida State, obviously their leading scorer. He is actually, unlike Stojakovic, I think the big difference with them, and it's worth noting, and I probably should have mentioned it with Stojakovic. Stojakovic has not declared for the draft. So he is going through the portal process. He is going to commit to another school. As I always say, by the way, on these videos, always subject to change in portal season. It is about 6 o'clock Eastern time when we're talking here. As of right now, Stojakovic has not committed. Doesn't mean by the time you watch this that he might not be committed by that point. So we'll see what happens with him. Jamir Watkins is one that is very much going through the NBA draft process, also in the portal. 18.5 points per game, played in the ACC, was the Florida State's leading scorer. He'd be another one. I think if you can get him, you absolutely have to. Because to me, I think, again, I just look at it. I think you're good in the front court. I think Stevenson is due for a breakout year. Visar is awesome. And I really do like some of the other pieces. I just don't know if Jonathan Powell is ready to go from a 7-8 point a game guy in the Big 12 to like a 14 point a game guy in the ACC. And by the way, if he is, and if I have misevaluated him, and if North Carolina has knocked the eval out of the park, then I'll own it in December, January, and February when we start talking about this team again. But is that kid ready to make a leap? Is Evans ready to be a guy that steps into the ACC from the Mountain West and is a day one guy that can make a difference? So to me, like I said, I don't want to keep reiterating the same point, but I do think that I think you need one more piece. I really do. I think the size is good. I think the athleticism is good. I think the shooting is clearly improved in the backcourt. Can you go out and get one more difference maker, one more bucket getter? If you can, by the way, then all of a sudden Torres will take the L, Carolina fans can take the victory lap on that tweet that I sent, and you can call me a dummy, but I still think you're one piece away. If you enjoyed that video, do me a quick favor. Make sure you're subscribed. Aaron Torres Pod YouTube channel. New clips, new videos going up every single day. Advertisers, you see that TV screen right there? Hit me up if you want your logo on that puppy. We have reached well over 1 million listeners, viewers, just since March began. We're not even out of April yet. Well over 2 million for the calendar year of 2025. So you want to advertise right there, hit me up, Aaron Torres, podcastquestions@gmail.com.